Hello, welcome to this mukbang with my awesome friend Carly, who's an ENTP and I'm an ENFP. And basically, we're going to be consuming our version of the little honey meal,
which
from Burger
is
King.
chicken sandwich, which we have here, and it's kind of cold now. Mozzarella sticks and a chocolate shake, and it's out of frame because we're not video editors.
We figured we'd have a nice conversation with these viewers. It'll be an ENTP, ENFP interaction video. Our friendship is very strong because we don't stick to just our functions and double down on that. And I think that the world deserves to know that, outside of the type context, we're just two very strange and similar and quirky individuals, but we know how we have differences and similarities that we both celebrate.
Yes.
But yeah, basically, so for more context, I have been staying with Carly somewhere in Florida for the last 5 weeks, actually. It was supposed to be a 3-week endeavor, which is already long. And then, I extended my trip by 2 weeks because I was scared of catching COVID while on the plane. So we've been in this lovely house together now for a long time.
4 weeks, going on 5.
Yeah, we are on week 5. We finished week 4. And we have managed to not kill each other. Not just survive, but also thrive. But yeah, anyway, Carly, what are your thoughts on living with someone like me?
Living with an ENFP is difficult because their SI is usually really bad. AKA, they're really bad at knowing how to put dishes in the dish tray so they drain the most effectively, and are prone to making mistakes. Like, if they don't put the dishes in the dish drainer, first of all, they'll put the bowls upright. Sometimes they just put it in there without thinking, but also they don't recognize that gravity exists. And one of my pot lids got completely shattered, and I'm finding glass to this day. But part of their charm is that, it's always a party, and we're always having fun, and everything is just chill. I can nag and be my,
Roasty self?
yeah, my, bad cop, because if I ever be a parent, I'm definitely the one that's going to be enacting punishments and all that. I can be that, and she doesn't take it personally because she knows what her strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And we have, so many therapy sessions about our childhood trauma and all that. And that's been going on, the whole time.
Yeah, so this is just a guess, but I presume that if someone stumbles upon this video at some point in the near future, perhaps far future, who knows, we'll be dying to know how ENTPs and ENFPs can get along. And, if you're one of these types, you'll have probably extrapolated that, in a sense, me not understanding how gravity works and drying the dishes is actually a container for a much larger set of just general existential problems. Because the common complaint, which Carly can attest to, that she definitely identifies with, is ENTPs look at the way ENFPs live their life, and they go, what incarnation's going on in that brain of theirs? Now, another thing to add context, though, is Carly loves ENFPs.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm just stuck with them a lot.
Not all ENFPs, but Carly has made quite a few, I guess not even ENFPs, but just FP friends over the years. So, it's easy to get stuck in your sob story, me being a prime example of oh my god, people with TI just hate on me for all my flaws. But then it's look at Carly's life. She interacts quite frequently with a lot of people that make dumb mistakes. So I think one of the number one things for anyone watching this mukbang, who's probably didn't come for a little huddy, who probably came to be how can two friends get along for 5 weeks without killing each other or something? It's a miracle. And the key thing, as the ENFP I'd say, is just own that to the rest of the world you may look like a dumbass, But the trick is to know you are not a dumbass. And this person...
Or to know you are one.
Okay.
And embrace it.
You are both a dumbass and not a dumbass. The paradox of living. Now, I would say that Carly is my biggest critic and my biggest fan at the same time. But it took me navigating my own limiting beliefs for so long to understand this fully. Now, something I like to explain to people when they ask about our friendship, but to be fair, it's not very often, but I'll pretend they're asking for this. Okay, so there was this interesting New York Times essay that Carly, credit, put me onto, where it was like, if you had the choice to like descend a staircase, and while you were descending the staircase, you would hear every single thing anyone had ever said about you, and the trick was, at the top of the staircase would be all the bad things, but if you could get past that, you would get to the good things. I think there was a point where we like explained our friendship as like literally the epitome of that staircase. Well, from my perspective, where like if I can get past the roasts, I can see that there's like this undercurrent of like genuine appreciation that I think many people have underestimated the ENTP species from. Sorry, I know this became like Crystal preaching and Carly being like, So yeah, sorry Carly, I'm monologuing, but can you weigh in on this kind of ENFPs not understanding that some of this tough love is genuinely love, and it's not like, wow, like you should like hate yourself, because that's like how we tend to conflate it. But I've learned it's actually kind of funny that I mess up so much, but that you still put up with it. Because I understand now how hard it is for you to literally deal with explaining things that are so intuitive to you, such as gravity, but also other things.
Well, I've always known that any attention somebody gives you means they care about you, whether it's hate or love, they're still talking. And
seriously,
I think one thing about us is it's like she would, back in the day, like, you know, super mad if I said something slightly wrong or naggy or critical.
Let me reenact. Short circuits, out of camera, out of view.
Well, I don't know what situation this is in a reference to, but I would just be like, why are you doing that? Like,
and I'd be
what?
like, ah!
I don't know.
Like, it's not a rhetorical question, it's actually genuinely needing to know. The ENTP just needs an answer, and you're like, I don't know, I guess I'm fucking stupid, is my inner monologue half the time. And it's like, bro, we don't need that right now, I just need to know.
Yeah, I don't get it, but I mean, it's just like being willing to like not be defensive. I think whenever I say something critical or something, just being like more neutral and not like, I don't know if this is more you being an ENFP or being a fire moon, because two of my really good friends are ENFP fire moons and they have the tendency to both do this. Mm-hmm. Where it's like I say something that like stomps on one of their triggers accidentally, and suddenly it's like, fuck you, Carly, seriously, fuck you. And I'm just like, what? And I don't stand for disrespect, so I just like leave the conversation or like leave the group chat or something, because I'm like, I'm gonna wait for you to calm down. And then I just did this to one of my ENFP fire moon friends who's not Crystal.
Yeah.
Where she said, fuck you, seriously, fuck you. And all I did was say like, maybe ghosting your parent. Well, I didn't even say maybe that's the wrong answer. I was like, I think you should focus on like communication or something, because I'm very solutions oriented, which is a problem with ENFPs for sure. But I just said that. She was like, you're taking my parents' side, fuck you. And I was like, okay, that's the wrong way to talk to me when I'm like giving your problems the time of day and trying to help. Yeah. Instead of like just blindly agreeing with everything you say, because that's just not the type of friend I am. And I'm working on that. I'm working on like not always being solutions minded, but I honestly did not think I came off that strongly when I said that. But anyway, after she said that, I just left the group chat, and she unfriends me on everything and sends me a monologue like, I assumed that's what you were going to do next, so I did it for you.
Carly, in fact, is not going to do that.
Yeah, I was just like giving you time to cool down, and I felt disrespected, so I was gonna leave the place I was being disrespected. And I mean, like, she apologized, we're okay right now, it's fine. But it was just such a like gut reaction. It's like you guys are really protective over your like FI and think that if I say something like slightly wrong to you, it's like a hit at your innermost feelings or something, or disrespectful, when it's like, no, just, I guess, trying to understand the other person and like why they're saying what they're saying, and if you have a trigger, being so clear about it and like giving a chance. And if somebody keeps stomping on your triggers, even if you've like said it, then that's another thing. But like,
exactly. I think that what's an interesting dynamic, I think we've like worked way past, but I definitely used to struggle with, is I don't quite understand like the entire context of where someone's coming from, especially when I'm triggered. Like I just like completely like can black that out. So it's like I will look at an ENTP, which is not just like Carly, but just like any person with TI, and I'll like hear what they're saying, and I'll like zone in on like the only thing quote that they've ever said, as opposed to like remembering all the validation that they've also given me. Or like, so it's kind of like, I think that ENFPs, or just honestly a lot of people with FI, think that they're the only person out there defending their FI, and that other people will just forget about their FI if they like get triggered. So I think that it's hard for you, like an ENTP, or just a lot of people with FE, because it's like, yo, like, you know that like I'm giving you this like advice with the given that I know all your triggers. So if it's like triggering, I can't like play God all the time and just magically know. And I think that we can get self-righteous, like, oh well, you should know that if you say this about my parents, I'm gonna take it as this. And it's kind of like, no, like, we don't always know everything from the FE user's perspective. So I think that we can take for granted your humanity, because y'all just sometimes, to us, it's shielded from view with the roasts. We hear the roast and we think there's like this, oh my god, what a dumb bitch, like catty thing behind it, when sometimes it's just honestly like a constructive criticism, or just a curious question that's not laced with this undercurrent of maliciousness. But I think that if you're an FP and you assume the worst of your FE user friend, that's why they will continue to ask a question that might sound kind of critical and salty, and you'll just continue to be just triggered. A cough break. I just choked on my own spit. But yeah, the TLDR is that...
There's a bug.
Damn, there's a bug. TLDR is that I think that Carly has gotten better at validating that my brain goes there, and I've gotten better at stopping myself and not making an assumption that Carly is like judging my entire existence, when it's really just one specific thing in a specific moment. And the judging is more like a curiosity, a question, rather than a, I've concluded you're a dumbass, which I think our brains go to.
Yeah, it's like taking a holistic approach, because this reminds me of like, somebody can tell you they love you 1,000 times, but you're going to remember the one time they say, I hate you. When, I don't know if it's a type thing or it's a me thing, but I like kind of approach everything and everyone really holistically. And I think that's one really good part about FE in general, is it's kind of like we take into account everything somebody's going through. Like, for instance, Crystal got into a tussle with one of our other like ENFP friends the other day, who had just spent the entire day hanging out with somebody who drains like all her energy and is like super annoying and toxic. So she spent all day hanging out with this person, and she's like already like not feeling great, and then she says something that's slightly triggering to Crystal that's not objectively bad, it was just personally bad. And Crystal like came out with fangs at first, and I was like, dude, you have to consider like she's going through this right now, and like, I don't know, there might have been other personal circumstances that were relevant, but I think the thing about FE is we kind of take into account everything, especially like SFJs are good at this with like SI and stuff, just awareness of everything going on in a person's life, and give them more benefit of the doubt, and don't like take every conversation and like just the transcript of it or something. Like you might just start taking the words for what they are from somebody without thinking maybe they're having a bad day.
Yes,
maybe
exactly.
This is like something related to a problem they have right now.
Exactly.
So.
I think FE is like, well, I think all extroverted functions, to use alphabet speak, to use function speak.
We're trying to not use alphabet speak too much.
Yeah, we're trying to be like real life examples and real life iterations and using labels minimally. But a general concept I thought of is that extroverted functions are about, possibilities. And I think that when you are an FI user, you will like narrow in and just look at what is of emotional prioritization to you. And the good part of being friends with someone who is as caring as Carly, underrated Carly, is Carly thinks of emotional possibilities, possible emotional interpretations to people's words, people's motives and actions. And I think that an ENFP in like a good place, like a neutral place, an untriggered place can like flow along with that. But it's when push comes to shove, you taste what you're made of. Rascal Flatts is a great artist, but because I do think that ENTPs, ENFPs, we all get along when like we're all like in our NE like riffing off the world and all the like interesting like what ifs and the memes. But when we get into conflict and we step on each other, we just react from opposite places. And we have so many like just like givens that we might not understand the other person operates off of. And a given that I've learned that you operate off of is seeing someone very holistically, and you're not necessarily always paying lip service to it because it's just like a general like golden rule inside your brain that I think you have like learned to like put words to it, and I've learned to stop myself before I go down the spiral of being triggered, because I can understand now that it's kind of like walking on eggshells around like everyone's like random like emotional prioritization of triggers.
But it's more like a cool laser maze.
Yeah, Carly is very good at like Tetris-esque like strategy games. So you've like engineered your way to be able to cope with all these. But I think it's also on us to understand that you are like a very adorable hedgehog. Like it's like prickly, but oh, it's so cute. Just like put on band-aids, because I think you also. Like, I think it's also...
I roast constantly. It's just one of those things. As an ENTP, I'm critiquing everything and everyone for my own entertainment all the time.
Yeah, except...
And it's hard to turn off.
Exactly. But I think it's like, we can look at critiques not as, like, trying to bring someone down, because that's not your intention.
It's literally for entertainment most of the time. Like, I critique my best friends, like...
Yeah, like, I'm like, Carly
this is a cringe tweet.
Like, yeah, Carly's speaking to me. And see... I think it's also like, Carly, you embrace your own cringe. You like literally like make fun of yourself, and like black comedy is totally like the ENTP way. And like it's like that stereotype of ENTPs are so sociopathic, they poke fun at everything. But I'm also like, dude, like some things should not be held sacred. And everyone takes life a little too seriously until you meet like an ENTP with like heart of gold, who kind of reminds you to look on the bright side, because I think we get in our own way with how much of downers we can be. And as long as we're not afraid of trying to think of it in a different perspective and getting around the trigger, I think it's nice to be around an ENTP who I can just bitch and moan about something about, and they'll like validate my ability to bitch and moan about it, because it's hard being an ENFP who's like coming to terms with the fact that we have negative like opinions of people that aren't just like emotional and personal. It's also just like, I'm so confused and like critical of this thing. And I think that when I'm around you, I don't have to worry about being too mean, because you'll like help the meanness like be strategized.
Everyone becomes more savage around me. Like I bring out everyone's snark, even the like nicest of FPs and FJs. And this reminded me of this conflict. We're watching Degrassi, which is one of my favorite shows. Anybody who's really interested in like MBTI, social dynamics, all of that should totally watch it, because it's a pretty well spread out of all the types, going through real life high school and sometimes middle school situations. But there's this like ENFP dude who's in love with an ENTP girl, and the season we're watching Dave and Allie, if you're curious, in season 10 of Degrassi, The Next Generation. Anyway, Dave, like one of his problems is he just gets like he's the ENFP, and he gets so easily like butthurt and embarrassed, and like one of his big things is having to like look cool in front of everybody and has like a major ego. Whereas Allie, who's an ENTP, she's like also obsessed with like coming off a certain way and like her popularity in school and everything, but she's also not afraid to embarrass herself. Yeah, and seriously. I feel like a healthy ENFP is also like that, because healthy ENPs, like, we're made to, like, be the embarrassing people and have, we're the dreamers, the doers, the round pegs and square hole, whatever, because, like, we can imagine the crazy shit, and, like, when you're negative and you're, like, honing that negativity on yourself, like, toxic Annie is just imagining every bad way somebody can interpret you, and you get, like, stuck in that, versus, like, healthy Annie is, like, everybody can interpret me however they want, but I'm gonna just be me and be as cool because it might inspire somebody, and it might inspire great things. Like, Allie made this dance club, and it was, like, awkward, and everybody who was gonna be in it dropped out, but they already were, like, booked to dance at a football game. So she gets, like, instead of being, like, Dave would have, like, crawled into a hole and been like, I can't do anything, I'm done. Really? Allie was just like, whatever, I'm the only member of Big D dance crew, and I'm just gonna dance, and if you want to join me, feel free. And just, like, embarrasses herself, and the whole school joins in, and I feel like I resonated with that so much, because I'm like, there have been so many times where I haven't minded being the scapegoat, because I have, like, a really solid sense of self-worth. And I feel like Crystal has it in her, but sometimes she gets into that, like, hole that Dave gets into where he's,
I am a Dave.
Embarrassed.
I really hope Degrassi fans watch this, because it's so much better if you know what we're talking about. Like, please, sound off in the comments if you know who Dave and Allie are from Degrassi. Like, they're pretty iconic. Okay.
We took a vape break, sorry. Well, by we, I mean me.
Hey, I sometimes vape. Sometimes. But
I also hate the moon. It's a Cancer full moon today. I just had to bring that up, and we're both Capricorns for the astrology nerds out there. I'm born on December 22nd.
I'm born on January 19th.
So we're like the first and last days.
Alpha Omega.
Well, I was the first day in 1995 where the sun moved into Capricorn on the 22nd.
Yeah, we're born the same year, but I'm older.
Yeah, we're both 95, so
yeah, we're like,
we are the cusp of zillennials.
We're the two different Capricorn seasons. But yeah, so to piggyback off what you were saying about Dave and Allie and Degrassi and how Dave gets butt hurt, but Allie is like not afraid to embarrass herself. I think that one thing people don't understand about ENTPs is that, like, even though they like detach from their own emotions and turn them off, it's not like they're not responsive to emotional input. So like a lot of the time, like an ENFP will be like trying to save face by getting defensive, as opposed to you just kind of wilt like a little puppy. You actually end up getting some validation, or sorry, puppies don't wilt like a flower, whimper like a puppy, something like that. Like, for example, if I go, at feeling criticized because Carly criticized how I stack the bowls, I would just, if I was like, oh,
she'd go back to her mommy wound of, my mom used to always complain about how bad I am at chores, and this is deeply offensive to me as somebody with mommy trauma.
Yeah, see,
I'd be like,
I know that, bitch.
Well, I mean, it's like, I know that, but it, like, instead of being defensive and being like, this wounds me, like, instead of that, well, this is me being a mean, critical ENTP, I guess, right now. It's like, just try to be better. Like, it's not hard.
It's like,
instead of being defensive, it's like, okay, let's give somebody less to criticize. Well, that's always been my mindset, and it's kind of hard, so I'm like a perfectionist in that way, where I try to, like, never do anything wrong, so that it's extremely hard to paint me as the bad guy in any scenario. Mm-hmm. Okay, this brings me to a good point, topic change. Ooh. Instead of me dwelling on your mommy trauma. Is we came up with this theory after dealing with a psychopath ENTP, whom I had a fling with. We came up with this concept.
She made a diss track about him, actually. Quick,
check it out on my channel.
Commercial break. I put some timestamps. Commercial break. Please check out Carly's channel, because she wrote an amazing diss track that is a work of art, and it was done at one day. Okay, like the editing of the video was not done in like one day.
Well, okay, I came up with the beat and the lyrics in like 3 hours, and then on a separate day, I learned Audition and Premiere to make like a Windows Movie Maker-esque video to go along with it.
So it really only took 2 days total, which is pretty impressive considering, like, it's a very high-quality thing. It's funny if you know the people, but whatever. Anyways, back to what you're saying.
It's still lyrical genius. But we came up with this theory about, especially ETPs, but...
ENTP, ESTPs.
Yeah, that we kind of, like, play everything like our game. We enter any conversation and stuff with the idea of, like, no matter what, I'm coming out winning. So an example of this...
Our game, our rules, our win.
Is, like, she was talking to this ESTP, she's really good friends with, and introduced him to an ENFJ friend of hers, and they were like, this ESTP friend prides himself on being very like deep, and I don't personally know him, so if you're watching this, I'm sorry. But this is my generalization for, you know, illustrative purposes. Anyway, he acts really deep, does like spoken word poetry, says he's into Zen stuff, all of that. And her ENFJ friend is also into all that, so she thought, let's connect them. And so the ENFJ friend came out like speaking deeply about it, and the ESTP would just ask a question like something about fear, like some deep vague question, and the ENFJ would like really thoughtfully answer it, and then the ESTP was like overwhelmed because
everyone's getting all deep in their emotions.
And so
in the FI.
He told Crystal he was deeply uncomfortable, he felt this entrenched on his boundaries, came at her saying that like she stepped all over his boundaries by opening this discussion, and he doesn't know the ENFJ that well, so he doesn't want to talk about that deep stuff. And I was over here like, okay, he's coming out with you as a villain, but it's just because he's threatened because he isn't actually as deep as he wants to be and feels like he's being humiliated in a group context with a new person. And the one thing we hate as ETPs at times is like being humiliated unless we like put ourselves in control of the humiliation.
Exactly.
Like if I come out to be like sort of humiliated, like Allie at the Degrassi thing, then I'm fine with it. But if I'm humiliated, not under my own control, like I can also be like weird. Anyway, so he felt humiliated, came at Crystal blaming her for this, even though it was no one's fault really. And then he, like, when she was just kind of, like, asking questions about it, he got more defensive and left. And then he came back the next day and he was like, don't call me your hoe, don't call me your bitch, because that's how she introduced him into the conversation. She I don't know exactly what her words were, but she was just kind of like, this is my hoe so-and-so, and blah, 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 blah. And that passed with no complaints until the end. And then it was after he came out with this, he comes out with that.
It's like boundary number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm like, whoa.
And it's like, you did wrong on this, 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 and this. And I feel like one thing that high TI users are really good at is like, if we're losing something, we can pull out shit that somebody else did that is like objectively bad to make them out to the bad guy, so that we did nothing wrong. And so that's one trap you have to like watch out with us, is sometimes that has no merit, because I don't think if like he never felt humiliated, whatever, he would have even brought up that was a problem. And maybe it was a problem all this time and he just chose to bring it up now to like win the fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think the FE way to get out of that is
to not you have to basically not try to win when an ETP is trying to win.
Yeah, just back down and be like, I'm sorry, that was wrong, I'm not going to do it again. And
yeah, because if you try to turn it into like a, well, I was justified by blah blah blah,
then it's just a constant debate.
That's not gonna work. Yeah. And
so back down, and then we'll be like kind of stunned. We'll be like, oh.
See, so the thing is, the viewers may not realize, but the reason Carly can point this out is because I think Carly has obtained ETP God mode in being extremely humble about this phenomenon, because basically
I know what I'm capable of.
Yeah, so it's funny because there's like the theorists out there, some who may be watching this, like to think that like if you're not like an FE Dom, then if you have FE in any lower position, you'll be very subject to feeling humiliated, even when it's not necessarily like anyone's fault. It just kind of happens. We just get embarrassed all the time. But ETPs like to avoid embarrassment at all costs, and they will like rationalize and like turn certain details into basically like points against people. So this is where like a lot of people have a common complaint against unintegrated, so not you, unintegrated ETPs who can basically seem like gaslighters and it's like on purpose, but really to them everything is a game. It's objective, it's strategy. Life is about strategy in video games, especially if you're like an ENTP.
And playing on people's weaknesses.
Yeah, and see,
because our FE is lethal. Like,
yeah, FE with no FI. Carly is not gonna say people who are overreacting to that, because Carly can observe the social effects of toxic ETPs and be like, that is actually a lot to deal with. Now, you know, you understand that you are not that way, and I'm more than happy to validate it. But it really comes down to like, I think that as an ENFP, I would give advice to FPs out there that you have to like have a handle on your flaws and not let them turn it into like extensive shame. Because if you have shame about everything and you basically don't get the one up on people, then you're gonna feel like a victim all the time, especially if you're like in an environment swimming with TI users. Because the thing about TI users is they will own, I have these flaws, but I have these strengths. And like life is like, kind of like at any point I could be better than someone or worse than someone. Versus like if I was like, I'm just worse when it's really unhealthy. And I think that when you're dealing with someone who is trying to get the one up on you,
hell-bent on winning, the best way is not making it a win-lose situation.
You have to have no pride. You have to be like, okay.
Let your pride down. Yes, shame is the lowest emotional vibration. So having shame is like really bad. I learned that from a PTSD therapist. And yeah, just owning yourself and having your self-worth and knowing that you didn't come in to hurt anybody's feelings, and if you did, apologizing because you don't know everything, but
seriously,
just coming in with like the goal of like not having a like outcome that favors you and just having the outcome of like the most positivity exchanged or something can definitely help in any TP conflict.
Yeah, so a very powerful phrase that I think it's funny because like in a sense our friendship, if we were to frame things in our cinematic universes, because we really have iconic lives, I think we have been the anti-hero of each other's lives in interesting ways, because I feel like we are so committed to our respective functions that we actually like without self-abandonment learned how to communicate with each other without abandoning the very thing that makes us good. Because I would say like you don't cave in to like coddling people if they don't deserve it, and I don't cave in to, I don't even know, just basically being sorry, which sometimes like because I am not capable of being emotionally manipulated. Like I will not do anything against what I believe in. And in a sense, Carly also will not cave in to like basically guilt or any of that sort, change her opinions. Maybe she'll try to emotionally validate people and sort things out, but she's not going to suddenly take back that opinion. And I don't think that's just an ETP thing. It's just as a
yeah, I think that's a me thing, is like if I strongly believe something, like principle wise, I stick to it. Like I'm not like, again, with my ENFP friend I had conflict with, I wasn't gonna just tell her that she's in the right because I didn't think she was in the right, and I didn't know the whole situation, so I should have just, like, I think the way I could have stopped that conflict from even happening, if I could, like, go back in time, is just be like, I'm sorry you feel that way. But I always think that's a cop-out because I'm just not, like, I'm just so solutions-oriented. Like, don't come to me to just wallow. It's like, come to me if you want help out of the wallowing.
Exactly. I feel like being friends with you is basically about like, hey, like how am I thinking about this situation incorrectly rather than what should I do? Because I think that like, okay, for example, with that example of the ESTP friend, I showed you my phone and I'm like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Can you please check my bullshit? And then you nicely did it. Because if I just come in getting ready to like get my ass beat, like not in a way where like it's like taking my pride away. I'm just like, I'm ready for an ass beating. I'm like, oh, that wasn't even that bad. Like it's like, I think living life in a way where like you understand it's your own shame and your own self-critic that's always harsher than the actual real person, and that you're actually projecting all the time. Well, okay, like there are toxic people out there, not gonna lie. But I think there's a difference between someone who you deep down know loves you criticizing you versus like, oh, am I letting a toxic person get away with this? And a lot of it is just like always keeping yourself in check. So then it's less about like, should I trust this person? More about, do I trust myself to handle even if that person was toxic? So when I built more self-trust, I was like, Carly has been the good guy this whole time. Whoa, that's cool. And then Carly also built self-trust to be like, hey, I'm allowed to just not really care what someone's going through, because you always care more than I think people realize about you. And that's, I think, a struggle.
Yeah, I think one thing about healthy TPs is just how much we care about, like, not only our friends and family and all that, but just about our principles. Like, I feel like that's really underrated, is how strong we're held to those. So I feel like you can kind of gauge a TP's toxicity by what values they hold closest to them. Because, like, with FI is a blind spot, especially. I feel like my FI has always been like really strong, but I just wasn't aware of it a lot of times, and I would like put other people's emotions sometimes over my FI, but my, I guess, TI principles were always like strong. So
what's an example of a TI principle you abide by? Tell the truth, be transparent.
Yes, I'm so big on transparency. And
even if this hurts, I must tell you it.
Yeah, and like, I just own up to everything I do. It's like one slightly good or bad thing is it's like, I have, you know, my ex is like very much in love with me and is like my best friend. And even if it hurts, it's like I tell him about my love life constantly because I'm worried about being perceived as like being the bad guy for stringing him along or something and not being honest about everything I do. So it's like, even if he doesn't need to know every exploit in my love life, it's like I tell him because it's just important to me to not be sneaky. Oh, that is one of my TI principles. Well, transparency kind of goes hand in hand with that. Is I can't be sneaky unless like, well, I just can't be sneaky, really, because if I'm being sneaky, then it's like the guilt eats me up inside and everything. So it's like having no filter to a bad degree.
I think it's like, it's kind of like giving people all the relevant information for them to then make a decision for themselves. Because I think someone's going to be in the comments being like, well, I think TPs are sneaky. And I'm like...
They can be. They can be. Okay, one thing with my toxic ENTP, former psychopath, well, current psychopath, former fling, is that he's sneaky, but he's not even aware because he thinks he's being honest all the time, but I can see through this. It's like choosing which information you divulge so that you can be like, oh, I've never lied. Well, it's like... It's
about controlling the narrative and the interpretation. I think that's when TPs are sneaky, when they're controlling how you see things by selectively divulging. Versus for you, it's like... It reminds me of chess, where like... So it's funny because
constant chess game with us.
It's like chess because actually what's funny is the ESTP friend you're mentioning tried to teach me how to play chess. It's not going that well right now. But to use it as a metaphor, he's like, when you can see all the pieces on the board, there are limited like possibilities. So there's like more freedom than say compared to poker, where like you don't know what someone's cards. You have to like think about it a lot more. So I actually think about like your transparency is like, here are all the pieces. Now you can like make the moves accordingly versus like omitting which pieces you can see on the board, like your ENTP psychopath X-Fling. That is actually what they would interpret as like sneaky, like controlling how people can see things by like not telling them certain things or telling them versus you're like, hey, I know you like me, and I still have this going on, even if it hurts. I'd rather you know it hurts and then act according from that, rather than them, like, finding out and being like, were you, like, pretending, or da-da-da. It's kind of like the context in which someone can interpret your actions with all relevant information on the board, so to speak. That is giving people their agency to use their own presumed existing TI to like understand you, which this X who also has TI understands her pretty well. But then there's another X who, you know, would be like really butthurt about that. So it really does come down to like who you're dealing with. Because I feel like sometimes I'm like, I wish people would keep things from me because like, holy shit, it hurts.
Yes, my most recent ex, like, this was an ex-fling, but my ex that I last dated is an ISFP.
So not the one that's like, you're super transparent with. This one you have to be a little more careful with.
Yeah, it's like, because I want to be transparent with him and stuff, because, well, I wanted to be transparent with him because we were in an open relationship, but he was straight up like, no, I don't want to know everything, and that, like, ate me up inside for a little bit.
You were like, so you want me to lie to you, basically, and just not tell you certain things? He's like, no, because it hurts.
And I'm like, wait, why would you like me if you don't want to know everything? And it like confounded me. But now one of my weird things is I'm like still good friends with pretty much all my exes that were relevant.
And why do you think that is, Carly?
Because when I care about somebody, it's like I don't get in a relationship where I don't deeply care about them. And so if I'm in a relationship, it's like I care about them no matter if we're dating, if we're this, if we're that. And as long as we're healthy for each other, because I will leave any situation, and that's what, I don't know if that's a type thing or what, But if I feel
who's an ENTP fan.
yeah, it's a me thing. It's like if I feel like we're having a negative impact on each other, then I will leave. But I feel like caring about somebody and what's best for them and all of that is not negative unless I was. So it's like me and my ISFP ex had to like go live our separate ways for a bit before we could come back and be friends because he dealt with like deep shame and resentment about actions that he took in the relationship, and it was really hard on him because it was just a really messed up situation.
Yeah.
But like we're now really good friends and close because we both care about what's best for each other and we can deal with each other's flaws since we know each other really well. And then my ex, who's my best friend,
so not ISFP. This is
my best friend in life is my ex, who's an ISFJ, and we are like two halves of the same brain, honestly. And he's the one I can tell everything about my life. So it's weird having these two exes who I'm both really good friends with, where one I tell absolutely everything, and one I have to like be a little more manicured, but he knows I'm not sneaky. So
yeah, because the ISFJ doesn't take offense easily, and that's actually a point I want to make. Is like, I think FETizers, like if they seem offended sometimes, which I used to get wrong, they're actually just deeply confused, and the thing to actually do is to not shut down and stop talking sometimes. I mean, obviously, if you feel like you've already tried, then like walk away. But I think that with FI, we tend to not explain the right things. We don't tend to listen very well when we're triggered, and we don't stay present with the fact that there are two people having a very human experience during conflict. And I think that something that I didn't understand really, because to be honest, I just didn't really like let myself ever like show you my hurt. Like you would just know I was hurt because I was being all defensive, but I wouldn't actually be vulnerable enough to try to like challenge my own interpretation of what was going on. Like
be on the defense instead of be on your own side.
Yeah, like initiation. Because like I think it's funny because something maybe some people watching would resonate with is like it's actually impossible to really offend like a TP like in their power. They'll just keep asking questions, and I'm sure that may get annoying. But like it's just kind of this thing of like you're digging into this curiosity of what's going on. You want to get it straight. You want to have the correct logical interpretation of what is going on. And I think that with FI, if we're not careful, we get ruled by fear. It'll feel like real life that person means this because I'm hurt and I feel it so viscerally that I'm like blinded by my own inability to see outside of that. And versus like a TP will not naturally feel that come up. They'll just keep talking because they'll remember the whole time with their TI, this person and who they are and their context and all of that, and they don't feel attacked very easily. You'll be like, oh, I was disrespected, but that's not the same as being attacked. I think you can keep your head on straight during conflict, and I think that we don't do that. Like, seriously.
Yeah, it's like I can detach from my emotions in a conflict really easily and just focus on the other person's emotions.
Yeah.
And when an FI user doesn't even know why they're feeling what they're feeling, they just know they're feeling it, that can get really hard. So it's like...
Yeah, like, we don't know the limiting beliefs. Sorry to use mental health speak or different alphabet speak, but, like, there are limiting beliefs I think FI can create. Like, I'm like, everyone just thinks I'm stupid when I can't dry the dishes properly. Like, for example, that is a limiting belief that makes me defensive. And now I've had to learn to be like, stop, breathe. The Carly is not necessarily implying you're stupid. Carly is just pointing something out for you to, like, fix or like take accountability for. It's not about like your entire existence is invalid because you can't like blah blah blah. So it's about for the FP slowing down enough to even hear what the person means, because we'll hear the tone of like disbelief over the confusion and interpret it as like, I'm offended that you didn't dry the dishes correctly, you stupid, go to hell, da da da. It's more like, like, you know, it's like mistaking annoyance for offense is not offense. It's just deep curiosity, and you have to just basically stay talking and not just like walk away or be all sad and just go into your own shell. And I think that that's something that I really learned from so many times just tripping over my own ass. So yeah. It's Carly's world and my world. We join a world together. How cute. But yeah, it is also about love languages, because like something that I know that you like once mentioned is like a lot of your friends like words of affirmation, but you're not just a words of affirmation person. You're not going to be
really
like,
bad at that.
I love how blah, 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 or it makes me, like, you're not going to verbally, like, emote and stuff. So it is.
When I do it, it comes from the heart. It really does. Like, one day a year, every year, Valentine's Day is my favorite holiday.
Yeah, and so tell them what you do for Valentine's Day, Car.
Yeah, for years, I've done this since middle school, it's like, I go out of my way to write cards, and sometimes it goes really overboard. I actually talked about this in my interview with Megan Lavoda, so go check that out. But,
link in the whole
honestly, yeah. But I just get like big cards and I write down lists of everything I like about a person on Valentine's Day, because I've always believed that Valentine's Day is about showing love in any form, and not just romantic love, but show like platonic love. And that's like when I just really let down my ego, and then in high school take a bunch of Adderall and like just go into everything I love about a person, just like spew my guts out on paper. So that one thing, I'm very sentimental, like this is my strong SI, is it's like I keep everything anybody's ever written me. And so I feel like sometimes one thing that like all TPs could do a little better is, it's like, since we're not constantly gorging over our love for everybody, is it's like make it tangible, especially for our FP friends out there, like our super feeler friends, is it's like give them something tangible to remind them that like I love this and this and this and this
Even
about
though I
you.
roast you, I also remember this about you. It's like,
yeah, it's like our roasts are also like heartfelt, because I think one thing about me is if I'm giving, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the video, if I'm giving you attention, that means I love you. Or
Seriously.
deeply hate you. No. But I still care, honestly. They're like two sides of the same spectrum. So, yeah, that's what I do every Valentine's Day, because I'm not really good at doing it every day of the year. But I show my love. I just don't say it.
But yeah, anyways, I think it's really cute, because to be close friends with an ENTP who you do trust, if you look past the roast, you have to be like, do I think this person has my best interests at heart? Like, weighing the good and the bad, because I think that with FI, you tend to look at the bad only when you're like in triggered mode rather than like when you're in good mode. And yeah, I think that it's about interpreting how someone loves you from a place of like not just like being mad that they roast you, but also understanding the power dynamic that you can like roast them too, even if you don't verbalize it. It's like,
yeah, please roast me in the comments. I always accept critique.
Like, it's kind of like, I think that a really handy thing for someone with FI trying to deal with a life of TI user friends is to be like, who are you to talk? But like not in a salty way, but in a neutral way. Like, it's kind of like noticing that if you feel vulnerable in someone's presence, it is not offensive to actually look at how they're vulnerable and to look at where they're coming from, which can be like, oh, they mean so well, and also like, okay, if I sense some saltiness, it's probably because X, Y, Z. So I think it's important for us to remember other people are also vulnerable too. We don't have to act on that, but I think the power dynamic can like shift more in your favor if you stop thinking that you're just worse than everyone. Because the reality is some people are just also worse than you. And I think that someone with TI takes that as a holistic given too. Like, you know, you like decide to take shots at things and people, institutions, because you also have an idea of your own vulnerabilities, your own flaws, your own accountabilities. And I think that like when the feelers get all offended, we like forget that we hold power in this sense. And I think I've learned a lot more about power from being friends with you.
I'm obsessed with power, both the power grid and power dynamics.
Yes. Yeah, seriously. I've learned so much about like game theory and like chess.
Chaos theory.
Right? Yeah, and like I think that like, so whenever people are all like, oh my god, like the TP is so annoying, why don't you like ever feel anything? It's like, well, they do feel things, we feel things about the system. Yeah, they feel things in a holistic big picture way, and I think sometimes we get narrowed down because we're operating from incorrect information at times that we might honestly forget if the trauma gets too real for the FPs. And I think that, you know, if we spend our time observing and learning from the TP, then like we won't suddenly throw that away in the midst of a trigger. It's like, for me it was like, Carly is so useful, I need to like not just burn this bridge, let me try the fuck to get my shit together, because the usefulness of it outweighs the bad. And I think that when we look at it purely from emotions as opposed to like strategically speaking, who else is gonna actually check me on my bullshit, which I could only think when I was untriggered. It really helped me understand. Now I'm like, oh, I love it when you roast me, because now I associate it with something good. Because no one else ever fucking takes me off my fucking pedestal sometimes.
Yeah, get an ENTP friend if you want to be taken off your pedestal.
Yeah, they will keep you humble. I think it is recognizing sometimes us FPs, we are on our high horse morally. We think that we are so morally above taking a shot or roasting someone else, when sometimes it's actually the opposite, where we're actually like I don't know, advocating for moral superiority when we do that. And I think it's like, you have a very humble approach to things that I think people don't understand. You're actually incredibly humble, and people hearing the roasts will be like, what? Like, how dare you, arrogant piece of arrogant piece of shit.
Freudian slip.
Like, you're all like, oh, you think you're so much better than me for roasting me. And it's like, no, they're actually not roasting you. They're just kind of standing on the same level ground. And with that context, everything suddenly crystallized into view that you are just another peasant, like all of us. So yeah, I think people accidentally put Carly on a pedestal because
this
Carly
happens a lot.
Yes, Carly is the only one roasting them in their life, and people just sometimes view criticism as like God smiting them. And while Carly does joke about being compared to God, this is not actually the area she wants to be called God, right, Carly?
No, I want to be called a god in my Tetris skills.
She's very good at Tetris. Like, Carly would just be like talking about some shit, just like multitasking with Tetris, and I'm like, interesting. It's like,
yeah, I'm dying here without a fidget spinner at the moment.
Yeah. But yeah, Carly's extremely humble. I'm like, I know Carly will not actually use FI to be like, yeah, I think I am so humble, because, so I will use FI and be like, I think Carly is very willing to explain things if you know how to ask. She doesn't think she's above. You shouldn't need explaining. Carly has never done that. Carly, yeah. People might project you think that, but that is not what you think. You are just pointing out what to you is the obvious, and then you go around and you're like, oh wait, this actually was not obvious to anyone else. The roast.
And I think just accepting that I have flaws too, like, helps a lot. Like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, look at how humble I am. I know I suck in some ways, but I think that's really humility, is like knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, being willing to work on what you're not good at, and accept things that you just will never be good at. And
yeah, exactly. Like when someone's critiquing me, I'm not going to be like, they're better than me because they're critiquing me. I'm more like, oh, they're critiquing me and I could critique them. And, you know, like, yes, as an FP can also critique. And, like,
everybody can critique.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I think that's one thing I bring out. I mentioned earlier, I bring out everyone's snark, because I feel like I help people realize that, like, not everything and everybody is great. And a lot of FI users especially are, like, so against shit talking. Honestly, just feelers. Feelers are, like, against shit talking because they're like, oh, this is just, if this person knew I was shit talking them, they would hate me, or, like, I don't want to be sneaky or anything. But, and it's not always just being able to say everything to somebody's face and knowing, like, the reason you're shit talking. Like, being able to critique the things around you and let it out in a healthy manner in the right environment with the right, like, cadence is, I think, really helpful, and just helps humble you in a way.
Exactly.
I know that sounds weird, that shit talking can make you humble, but I think doing it correctly and all that does, and it's just accepting that people have the right to critique me, but I also have the right to critique them, like you said.
Exactly, and like, it's not just like a Carly can critique, but you can't critique, and it's like, well, if Carly were to, like, become offended or something, it's like, well, Carly's human, so, like, whatever. Like, my theory is that we might think negative things, but they're always from an emotional place, and we just don't understand the value of, like, letting out the negativity before it becomes a problem at times. Like, I'm just like,
yeah, don't be repressed.
Yeah, like, I'm just like, I just don't get why blah blah blah. Like, I'm just confused. Like, I think that as an ENFP who it took a long time to have, like, negative opinions that actually weren't just me being offended, it was just me being deeply confused. That was when I felt myself integrate more, so to speak, because I realized that, like, it's kind of keeping you on your toes and keeping you immune from bullshit. Because basically, I realized I have a problem with detecting lies that people are telling me to emotionally manipulate me sometimes. Like, it's interesting because I think that from a distance, I can like hear the red flags in like how someone's behaving. But if I'm like close to someone and they're just doing something that's like not necessarily triggering me or annoying me, but just something that's kind of like cringe, so to speak. I think like the word cringe and how people describe that was a very TI term in origin. Like you're just being like, I cringe at that even if I'm not personally like annoyed or angered by it. But like to me, it became a thing where I was like, oh, like sometimes like I refuse to look at someone's flaws for perspective when I could use remembering that when we're in conflict, that they're vulnerable because I remember the flaws, and therefore I'm not going to actually just stomp on them and disrespect them. Like me being like, oh, this person has this really cringe tendency. If I remember that, if I judge it as cringe without being annoyed by it, I'll remember it when push comes to shove and not just like go off on them. Because lately my whole thing, not that anyone here would know, but lately my whole thing is like, I've been like just letting my temper out at people, which is my unskillful way of integrating that, hey, you don't have the right to like trample on me, and let me try to remember that I have power in this dynamic, and then I accidentally abuse it. Then Carly checks me. Carly can make me feel actually pretty validated in what I'm picking up, just not in how I responded. Because lately I've just been taking all this repressed like anger and feeling like just like the punching bag of the world sometimes, when I don't remember holistically how the world may also see me as like untouchable. And really it was Carly who taught me a lot about like, hey, just take yourself on a neutral plane. Don't take it too personally, like, wow, people worship me or hate me. They just gotta feel like, oh, I love like crystals in existence. And I feel like you don't put anyone on a pedestal. And that is actually quite humbling to realize.
It's really hard for me to find people to idolize.
Yeah, Carly will like kind of comically stan people, but like
Lil Huddy. But I also think after watching Hype House, I see his flaws.
Yeah, like it's like funny because I think that when you like stan people or joke about liking something that's taboo, it's actually in a sense a comedic shot at them. Because I feel like if someone were to actually critique these people, you wouldn't be like, hey, what the fuck? You'd be like, oh yeah, I know, the person's actually, but they still are good in this way.
Yeah, everybody has good and bad, and nobody should be idolized, and nobody should be completely hated. And yes, this does include Hitler. I think
someone's offended. She mentioned Hitler. Forgets the whole video, just the Hitler part.
That would be a total FP move or something.
Some with FI is like, hey, did you know that like Hitler killed all these people? And it's like, yeah, I do, bitch.
Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by Jim Jones a lot in school because I found him incredibly fascinating. And I mean, there were good parts to what he did, like making people who felt like they had no community have a community. But yes, he did cause a mass suicide.
Yeah, because things are never just black or white, good or bad. I think that like a TP learns how to like kind of like skate within the lines and around the lines, and it's always like by choice.
And humor. Humor helps like a lot of things. Like, don't hide behind a huge shield of humor, but I feel like when put in the right place, like that's one thing ENTPs are really good at, is like bringing the humor out of situations, even your depression and all that. Like, don't make your depression a complete joke, but yeah, if you sit here and take it all so seriously, it's kind of bad. So it's like having a healthy dose of humor in everything you do is really an asset.
Like, I feel like you don't see things as some people are just born evil, which I think can be tempting to reach for when you have FI. You just think, oh, I would never do XYZ bad thing, like participate in a genocide of Jewish people as a German citizen. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that, like, whoopsies, how did I end up here? Like, I think that, like, when you have TI and you are, like, understanding the deeper roots of human psychology, and, like, if you can roast it, then you won't basically get prone to being brainwashed about your own morality. You'll just understand the rationalizations people have for doing really terrible things. Because I think that, like, when you don't share the same FI as someone, like, you will be like, oh, they have FI that's evil, but my FI is good. And I think that really undeveloped FI can be prone to this kind of group think. And I think that when you have TI, like you, kind of being able to roast everything on the same level, like, let's joke about, like, this really taboo thing and joke about this totally harmless thing, then you actually are able to kind of keep it neutral in your mind. And that's really important to not let that colonize. Because when you lose your critical thinking, then you find yourself in a blind rage doing things like, fuck you, Carly, seriously, fuck you. When that person really probably didn't mean to, because there's all these good times to validate that. But it's like,
it's so weird with ENFPs like that. It's like they forget every good thing that I've ever done if I say something that suddenly offends them.
Your like emotional accreditation is just stripped away. You're like, you no longer graduated with a master's degree from the University of We Love Carly. You are now, you're like stripped of your credentials. You are now an exile dropout. You've been suspended, and I don't even know if this metaphor works really, but I do think I do think being stripped of your credentials emotionally is something that us FI users do when we're in a blind rage. I don't know if any of you are gonna resonate with that, like, because I'm saying it probably when you're like in a decent, okay mood or some shit, but like, I have identified now that I am not to be reasoned with unless extremely validated when I'm upset. And this is like great if you have like a fellow FP friend, but most of my friends are not FPs. And I had to learn to keep a handle on my own self and be like, talk myself off a cliff into saying something I'm gonna regret, especially because I will just go so deep into the trigger and that will be my reality. And then just learning from you, Carly, it's like, detaching from your emotions is something I actually can do better because I know you, versus for you, it's actually sitting with emotion and being like, hey, let me actually feel sorry for myself, because I rarely do that because I'm too busy roasting and keeping nothing sacred, including my own feelings.
Yeah, don't roast yourself too hard.
Yeah, because sometimes you actually need to like feel bad and feel not guilty that you put a boundary up with someone and walked away, or that you, I don't know, or like, I don't know, just like the transparency thing can get you wrong. Sometimes it's a self-protection thing to keep some things to yourself.
Yeah. And I think one thing to just take away from this dialogue is
it's a very long video, but I promise timestamps will be provided for those who are listening.
Is just a balance of everything, I think, makes you holistic, and that's not something, of course that's vague and like not that insightful, but having a balance of roasting to yourself and to others, having a balance of humor to yourself, to others, neutral, like not seeing everything as black and white, good and bad. Everybody just has this constant everybody inside, or be kind to everybody because everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. But like seriously, that just helps a lot, and I think that's like one of the keys to why I don't really get into conflicts that often with people these days.
Exactly.
I got all my toxicity out at like very appropriate ages. Like I've done some really messed up stuff, but it's like one thing I do look fondly on is I'm like, okay, I did really like psychopathic things, but I was in middle school and high school, so it's very forgivable. My brain wasn't
trolling
formed.
your teachers into tears, definitely psychopathic.
And making a fake persona online in a Quizlet group, and having an intense romance with myself in 2 browsers, and then like, but basing it on somebody real in the school that I never talked to. Okay, I've done some messed up things. But
yeah, and it's like
giving yourself grace. I think one thing with ENTPs, or maybe even ENFPs, I don't know, maybe it's not a type thing, is it's like, understand, like, have compassion for yourself when you do messed up things. Like, understand that, like, be on your side again. That's one thing I really, like, preach, is, like, be on your side. Even if you did this messed up thing, know, like, why you did it and how you were, like, protecting your inner child.
Your limiting beliefs that made you do that.
Sorry, yeah, because I feel like there is a reason behind a lot of things, and it's like, don't villainize somebody for, okay, this sounds bad. This will sound taboo, but I'm an ENTP. Like, if somebody cheats in something, don't be like, oh, they're an adulterer and they're faithless and this and that. Necessarily be like, why did you even cheat? Are you not getting, like, this thing from your relationship? Like, what are you missing? Like, don't just completely villainize yourself because you broke a law of human existence.
Exactly, which does not excuse people.
No, like, take accountability, yes, but also accountability and compassion, like, balance them out, because if you don't have compassion for yourself, who is?
Exactly. It's like, I'm hurt and offended. What else am I seeing besides that? And so it's like, with the power of our powers combined, you can have a degree of detachment, but also, like, acknowledging your own emotions. You can't just self-abandon, but I think it's also a form of self-abandonment to just listen to the offense and act blindly from that perspective, because life is always about a mix of like different interpretations. And between the two of us ENPs, we got them all covered. So yeah.
Except NI, we're missing that.
Yeah, well,
God help us find a path in life.
Yeah, we're like, this is my intention, and I get straight away because I'm like, oh shit, well it's less interesting this way, but we'll work on that. Anyways, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed us pep talking you about the differences between ENFP and I love this bitch so much. I'm gonna miss her when I
feel sorry for anybody who listened to us for an hour, but you know, I hope you gained something and at least laughed once. And if not, go watch my diss track. Maybe you'll laugh at that.
Hey, just saying, me is, but I'm like, oh, who wouldn't love listening to us? But to be fair, yes.
I would never watch this video.
Some people would be like, wow, how, see, okay, perfect example. She would never watch this video, roast, but she sat through this whole fucking thing talking to me. Perfect example. Carly just embodied the concept that we are, I guess, teaching y'all, because I'm looking at the demographic of people that would watch the whole thing are people who are really desperate to learn about the good in an ENTP, because they are like,
and an ENFP.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, me too. Okay, true. See, one sentence. But yeah, anyways, please sound off in the comments if you loved Carly and me, but you're probably,
or if you hated us,
we just want to know.
Or if you're completely neutral.
Look, just having a response to us, even if you're like, I didn't even fucking get through the whole thing, you just magically just tell us that anyway.
I laughed when you said you liked Hitler.
like literally, they call me Hitler. I should be like, feet cameo mention of Hitler. But yeah, please enjoy an ENTP, ENFP getting along and having a very candid conversation about the not so great but still lovable parts of us.
Bye.
Bye.